Thanks very much for doing this, David. Let's start with the question that I think most people are going to have when they see this book on a shelf at the bookstore or hear about it, and that is, how does the former Democratic whip of the U.S. House of Representatives end up writing a novel about Pope Francis, the role of women in the church, and this extraordinary 1,200-mile journey of a Honduran family to the U.S. border?
Well, I guess the answer to that question maybe is connected to several different parts of my life. I'll answer the Latin American piece, the journey that the family took. That I had spent probably most of my career in the United States Congress working on Latin American issues, starting with the Panama Canal issue when virtually nobody else wanted to do it in the House because it was such a hot potato in the late 70s. And so I had a lot of trips down to Panama, and then I spent a good deal of time. I was the leader. Tip O'Neill asked me to be the head up the Central American Task Force in the Democratic Caucus. And so I was pretty much on the front line of all that period in the late 70s throughout the 80s and into the early 90s, and the wars in Central America, the CIA wars that were run by Reagan and his team. And we battled them in the Salvador situation, in El Salvador, of course, in the Nicaraguan War, the Contra War, and of course in Guatemala, the horrific civil war that they had there for so many years. So I was associated with that issue and spent many years there and traveled to Latin America and to small villages and towns and became familiar with that part of the world. I would also say that my Catholic upbringing, when I was a kid, I remember we had Sisters of St. Joseph nuns, and one in particular had a real interest in what was happening in Central America. And we would talk about it. And that kind of stayed with me. And then it stayed with me to the extent that when I went to the University of Iowa, in Iowa City, I sought out Latin American classes from Dr. Peter Snow, who was a professor there. And I was very interested in Latin America. So those kinds of pieces of my life, my religious life, my political life, put together, created an interest in this subject. And I was very distraught, as I say in the book, in the acknowledgments, when Trump was elected in 2016. And I needed some balance there in my life. I was out of the Congress by then. Of course, I had been left in 2002. But I really wanted somebody who I could look up to, who I could feel pride in, whose values I embraced. And there he was. And I didn't know much about him, so I decided to jump in and learn about him. And I got Austin Veray's book, his biography, and it was really a wonderful biography. I loved reading it, and that started me off on Francis.
Wait, just to be clear, we're talking about Francis here as opposed to Trump.
That's correct.
Good.
But we are talking about Francis here. Yeah. Did I say that the biography was about Trump?
No. But I don't think you had mentioned Francis before describing what you were doing. But yeah, as you note in the acknowledgments, I think it maybe was even Inauguration Day when it hit you that you wanted to do something as a result of what was happening. Right.
And I knew that he was doing good things, was trying to do good things, at least on my value spectrum. And I wanted to be part of that, and I wanted to learn about it, and I wanted to talk about it. And I needed that as my own sort of barometer dealing with the world. And so it became an interesting opportunity, and I eventually decided this might be interesting to write about.
Yeah. And the role of women in the church also plays a prominent role in the novel. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, I think it's the big weakness in the church, the biggest weakness in my own personal view.
Yeah.
there's a quote by Michael Gerson, the writer and excellent writer, op-ed writer of the Washington Post, in which he talks about how really we're missing the mark, the churches, by not taking advantage of all the wonderful abilities and skills and values that women, Catholic women, bring to the church, and by limiting them, by not making them eligible or available for the priesthood, or I should say special orders, not even the priesthood, perhaps maybe just the first role, the deaconess role. That's really it's hurt the church. It's hurt the women, Catholic women. It's a really big problem. I don't understand how an institution that maintains such a strong passion for justice and mercy can negate over half of its members from advancing. They're on the bottom of the pyramid structure of the church. You know, you got the top, you got the clerics, and of course the prelates are at the top of that part of the pyramid, and then the rest, the priests, and then you got the laity, and the women are down there, kind of with the at the very bottom, unfortunately, with divorced Catholics like myself, and gay and lesbian Catholics as well. So, you know, what do you do about all of that? And I wanted to raise the issue of, because there's so many capable, and that's why I elevated in the novel Sister Obinibo of Nigeria, who took the bishops to task at that meeting in February of 2019, with that Pope Francis called to deal with the sexual abuse crisis. She was very strong. Sister Norma is the main character, and Sister Norma Pimentel is the main character in the book because she's a very strong woman as well. And then I have several others. Sister Chittister, who's probably one of the more preeminent theologians, I should say, in the church and the world. These people's voices need to be elevated and heard more, even though they are sought after, and we do see them occasionally, but they're limited in what they can do.
Let's talk a bit about the title. You mentioned at the outset that you drew it from a line from A Merchant of Venice. Tell me how you came to that.
Well, I saw it, you know, I like poetry, and at the house I live, we have about an acre and a half. I have a sculpture garden that I've been fooling with for about 10 years now. And it's quite nice. It's you know, things that I put together, other people put together, and things that I actually see. And one of the things we have in the garden are poetry boxes. I have 6 of them. You kind of walk through the garden and up and around. And I fill it with, Judy and I, my wife, we fill it with poetry, change it seasonally. And I came across the Mercy piece that you're referring to here. And it's a long piece. It's not just the words that I have in the book. But the words that really struck me the most were the words that when mercy seasons justice. And what Shakespeare was talking about there was kings. He was talking about kings. Kings come closest to God when their mercy seasons justice. Closest. He didn't say they became God. They came closest to God. So I thought that was a really interesting and provocative way to talk about public officials. And so I liked it. I liked its sound. I liked its feel. And that's why I used it.
Yeah. It's interesting in reading the book to see some names and places that are pretty easily traceable to your own life. I was struck by a couple of characters, Miguel Cabrera and Juan Soto. who share names with a couple of notable baseball players, one from the
I was
Detroit
wondering
Tigers
how many people were going to pick that up.
and the other the Washington Nationals. So what's the story of that?
Well, well, Miguel Cabrera actually is a real person. He is a
Right.
friend of my family's. He works and helps me with the garden. We've done some sculptures together and pieces together, and I've known him now for probably 12 years. But he has been coming over to the United States. He's from Escala in Mexico
Uh-huh.
for 20 years. And he started to come and go to Ontario on Lake Erie and do the tobacco for the cigar wrappings many years ago. Then he got a job here in Southern Maryland. And that's where I found Miguel and his uncle and his brothers and others of his that would come up here with him, and I got to know them pretty well. But Miguel has become almost, he eats dinner here. Well, he was until obviously the pandemic put it
Right.
about March. But I help him out a little bit, and Judy, and he's just a wonderful guy. He's got 4 kids. They're not kids anymore. One is a medical doctor. He's put him through college doing this kind of work. Eight months out of the year, he is here, and then he's back in Mexico 4 months. He comes in April and he usually leaves before Christmas. And the other one's a teacher, medical doctor, teacher, and then 2 daughters who are, one of the daughters is going to become a teacher, and then the youngest one is in college now. So he's very close to the base. He didn't even know who Miguel Cabrera, the baseball player, was. I had to really tell him.
That's great.
But that character in the novel, who is because he cannot get work anymore because of Trump, ends up getting support from Father Peter Daly and Father Coto Moreno in Honduras in getting a job, because jobs are hard to come by in Mexico, and nothing that matches what he was getting up here working in a nursery. But anyway, he ends up getting a job as an escort, helping people, refugees come up and go back as well.
Yeah. In your notes at the end, you say that undertaking something like this really requires a leap of imagination on the part of the writer. What was that like for you as a first-time novelist, and what do you think the experience might be like for readers?
I loved it. I mean, it was fun creating this and then making it plausible. I mean, you can create things, but if it's not believable, it's going to be hard to sell it, and people won't read it. But I loved the idea of imagining what it could be in the church. And that's why, as you get later into the novel, you realize what I'm about here. I'm trying to change the attitudes of the church with regard to women.
Yeah,
So, which is hard to do, because even Pope Francis, who I admire so much and is one of the shining bright lights in certainly in the world community today, and certainly in the novel, he comes from cultures that have sexist reputations. Italy, Argentina, and the Roman Catholic Church. And so that's how he was raised. I mean, that's his brotherhood of priests and bishops. That's their mindset, and it's hard to break that. It's kind of, I call it not only the glass ceiling, I call it the stained glass ceiling. If we can break the stained ceiling and in the church, I think we will have a brighter future.
Yeah. What impact has researching and writing this had on your own spiritual life?
Well, it's enriched it. My spiritual life had just about, the light had been almost extinguished after college, and I won't tell you why, but it's a more personal thing. But anyway, but I never gave up on it. And I was always mindful of the church. And I'll tell you another story as well. I think, interestingly, I was drawn back to the church by the sexual abuse scandal. I mean, it was chasing people away, but for me, I was drawn to it because I remember sitting in airports uh, and you know, just sitting and reading or just watching people. That's a good place to watch people. And I'd see a priest walk through the airport. This is during the time of the sexual abuse crisis, when it was in 2002, maybe even
Yeah.
before that.
Uh-huh.
And I'd see a priest walking through, and I would think to myself, you know, you know, there was lots of terrible abuse that was done. But this guy here, I don't know, he may have been really a good priest.
Mm-hmm.
And what's his life like now? How many people are sitting in this airport and watching him walk by and thinking the same thing maybe that I was thinking about? And I said, I could be in his shoes, because I
Mm-hmm.
studied for one year at Sacred Heart Seminary in Detroit. And I'd be about his age right now. And
Hmm.
you know, and I know that there is all this wonderful work that's being done in the church by people all over the world and in this country. And a good example of that is a person I personally admire, and that's Father Peter Daly, who writes for the National Catholic Reporter,
Yeah.
and really just a strong, courageous guy who stands up for what he believes in. Stood up to McCarrick when no one else would.
Mm-hmm.
And long time ago, he figured him out.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I was drawn back for that reason as well.
Yeah. You know, at NCR, of course, we're really grateful that you've designated the proceeds of this book to us to help fund both Earthbeat and Global Sisters Report. Tell us what prompted you to do that.
Well, you know, I've written 5 books now, and I think 4 of them I've given. I mean, we're comfortable, my wife and I. We have more than what we need, and our children are doing okay and fine. We're not wealthy, really wealthy, but we're okay. We're doing good, and so
Mm-hmm.
I don't need it, and others need it. The last book I did, we gave some of the money, or actually all the money, to an organization called the Mikvah Challenge that works with kids that are challenged in inner city schools and gets them into leadership positions, teaches them how to speak, and all those kinds of pieces. It's called the Mikvah Challenge. So anyway, I thought this would be a good place to put it. You're the guy who was before you, Tom Fox, the publisher, made
Right.
a real plea on one of our board meetings about helping out Earthbeat and doing something special. And I thought, well, to myself afterwards, well, let me think what I can do. And I thought, well, maybe this is something I can do. So, you know, we're working at it, and I think we'll raise some money for it.
All right. David, thank you so much for the good conversation.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.